Welcome back to Couch Critic. You got Dennis P, and I'm joined by a special guest once again, Andy Saunders from the Chelsea. And what we're going to do with this video is break down the two games from the previous week, which were the Wolves away and also Chelsea versus City at the Bridge. Now, before I get into any of that, can you please do me a big favor and hit that like button, that subscribe button, and also that bell notification to keep up with the latest and the newest. Let's get right into it. So, Andy, we were able to travel together up to Wolverhampton to watch Chelsea play the Wolves. And
you earned the gas money for that.
Yeah. Oh, you know, it's coming. It's in the yeah, it's in the post. It's in the mail. But so what were your takeaways from that particular game, other than the fact
that the away game, right?
Extremely poor.
Well, it wasn't a lot of fun, was it? I mean, I think we went along with high expectations of being able to take a decent game to Wolves, and I don't think we played that badly. But what really came across in that game was our inability to finish our chances. We should have been 2-3 goals up, and I think if we had been, we would have, coasted through that game fairly convincingly and shut them out. But if you don't take your chances, if you don't kill a game off, then you always leave the door open for a pressing team like Wolves, who like to play on the front foot. They like to attack, and you're always going to leave yourself open to that, and you're always going to be vulnerable, and so it proved.
Yeah, we did make a lot of changes in that match as well, if I'm not mistaken. We brought in Christensen, we had Cesc Fabregas, and Morata came back in and started up front. And I think one of the aspects that I was focusing on in that game that I thought were evident was Wolves' ability to press the ball, and also the slowness in which we were able to break out of the press. And I don't know about you, but I felt like Cesc Fabregas in particular was struggling with the pace of the game, and not so much the way he thinks the game, but when you're at the fulcrum of that midfield three, you basically have to move quickly. And for me, he wasn't necessarily getting in positions to receive the ball quickly enough. So guys like Christensen and Rudiger would have to dwell on the ball a little bit longer than they would normally have to. And as a result, the press would come faster, and they'd be forced to make quicker decisions. At terrible positions on the pitch where you want to be able to move freely. What did you think about that?
Well, I think that we know what Cesc's limitations are. We also know what his strengths are, and I thought in the first half he played extremely well. He probably had a shout for player of the half. If you give to back in style. If a team gets on the front foot, he can struggle because he just doesn't have the pace. Christensen, I thought, looked fairly imperious in the first half. But, once again, Christensen, with a couple of mistakes, a couple of poor judgment decisions, showed that he's not the finished article.
No.
By any means. And unfortunately with Morata up front, Morata just had one of those Morata games where he just couldn't finish. I mean, the guy is clearly so lacking in confidence. I don't think he's a bad player. I think he's a decent player, but he's not got any confidence at the moment. And in the Premier League, when you go away from home, you've got to have a bit of swagger about you. And unfortunately, he doesn't. You've got to have some presence up front as a striker in the Premier League. I mean, one of the things I wanted to mention is that, and I've said it before, I don't think we're going to struggle at home, and we'll come on and talk about the Man City game in a minute. But I do think we'll have problems away because we just don't seem willing or able to adapt to other teams' style away from home. And we know that at home, teams play their style.
Right.
Wolves were set up in a way that allowed them to break really quickly on us and to exploit any counter-attacking opportunities. And as some of our sloppiness in midfield, our inability to get the ball out of defence for the one of the goals was utterly ludicrous. And I'm all for being able to play the ball out of defence and keep control and stop the ball coming straight back at you. But when it's done sloppily and poorly and casually like it was, it does put you under huge pressure. So I do think that was a huge wake-up call for Sarri. I do think that and the Spurs game combined shows that he has to be a little bit pragmatic, and clearly he was in the Man City game. So maybe that's green shoots of progress.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. There's definitely a noticeable change between the ability to play out the back from the Wolves game even to the City game. And
well, that's what Luiz gives you. I mean, Luiz gives you that ability to to play out from the back and to spray the long ball and to do that. And Christensen maybe he's not as adept at that style of play as maybe we hope he would be.
Yeah, it's funny
Yeah.
because I would say that one of the strengths that I've noticed from Christensen is his composure. But like for whatever reason, within the last, I don't know, ever since I guess the Barcelona game, his composure has been, put to the test, and he hasn't really answered the bell.
We looked great in the first half. He looked really,
He was.
him and Rudiger looked fine. There was no problems. We got a kind of slightly lucky deflected goal. We created chances. We did everything that you would expect to do away from home against a team like Wolves. And I don't think my heart rate moved above normal at any point during the first half. And it wasn't until we really started to get very casual, very sloppy, and not play to the system, that we should have done, that problems started to arise. And you always know with Wolves that they are quick and fast and agile and a flexible team who've got a good manager who understands how to exploit weaknesses. And we should have been able to deal with it, but because we didn't put our chances away, because we didn't create that cushion, because we didn't give ourselves the comfort of a 2 or 3 goal lead, we made ourselves vulnerable and we were punished for it. And that's what happens in football. We can't dwell on it. It just happens. We have to move on, learn from it and move on.
And it's seemingly becoming like more and more of an issue with Chelsea. Actually, within the last like 3 or 4 years, this ability to kill matches when the opportunities are presented, and it reared its ugly head again. And as a result, we saw in the City game, Hazard was played in the striking role, which I think produced the win in a lot of ways, because not only was he able to hold up the ball effectively, stitch through passes, break quickly, but he was also it was also him playing the striker that allowed Willian and Pedro to formulate that midfield 5 that made it very difficult for City to play through the lines. And as a result, guys like Silva and Bernardo Silva, David Silva were invisible the entire match.
Well, David Silva went off injured, which helped. Which was a godsend, to be honest. Aguero was injured.
Yeah.
We have to bear in mind De Bruyne is still injured. Some of the playmakers were not on the pitch for the entire game. But look, take nothing away from Chelsea. I thought it was a fabulous result and a fabulous tactical performance. I thought we absorbed it really well in the first half. There's no doubt that City were the better team in the first half. They put us under pressure. They looked confident and arrogant, almost moving forward. They had chances. Sane had a great chance that he didn't finish. I think that they had 2 or 3 opportunities to put us under pressure, and they didn't. I think a lot of credit has got to go to Azpilicueta and Luis, particularly at the back. Who I thought were brilliant for the entire game.
Agreed.
A bit like in the Wolves game, we exploited their vulnerability. If you don't put a team to sleep when you have the opportunities, you will leave yourself open. First half, they were the better team. I thought we defended really well. It was smart tactically. Second half, we just came at them. And what was really interesting, I thought what the tactical brilliance and what we haven't seen from a Chelsea manager for a long time was Sarri's reluctance to defend when we've got the goal. We will just double down.
Yeah.
We will keep going at them. We haven't seen a Chelsea manager do that for forever. I said on Twitter, Mourinho would have stuck Mikel on after the first goal. Conte would have put everybody back on our goal line.
Yeah.
Managers would have just stuck people behind the ball and defended. Now, Sarri's smart enough to realise you don't do that against Man City. They'll just pick you off. They will eventually break you down. The only way to play City is to take the attitude that attack is the best form of defence. And I think that, as we move forward, as we press them, as Conte in the advanced role worked again, and I thought Jorginho had an excellent game. As people start to understand Sarri's system, as they start to understand what their individual jobs are, and they understand that to play that system, you've got to be a warrior. You have to be at 100% all the time. And I was sitting next to my son, and my son turned around to me at the beginning of the second half and said, and it was a really insightful thing to say. He said, "This game will be won or lost on concentration."
Absolutely.
Luis can concentrate for the next 45 minutes, particularly Luis. If he can concentrate for the next 45 minutes, we can win this game. The only way they will break us down is through a lapse of concentration, not somebody not picking it up, somebody not picking up the runner, a player peeling off at the edge of the box that nobody tracks, somebody at the back post. If we can concentrate, if we can do our jobs, if everybody can play to the level at which we know they're capable and the system in which we know that is going to be successful, then it'll be fine. And it was. And it was brilliant for that. And I loved it. And I loved the vindication of Sarri's football. I loved the vindication of some of our players. Sorry, I'm going on a little bit now. But, I think that You know, David Luiz has proved himself to be a huge, big game player. You know, his problems come in the little games when he loses concentration. His games come when he's playing Everton, or where he's playing, you know, Fulham, or where he's playing a team where, you know, he just loses concentration. He gets a bit cocky in those really big games, whether it's Munich, whether it's Saturday. You know, he can be a huge big game player, and so I'm delighted for him.
Yeah, so I noticed a tactical switch in this match too, the City game, and I wonder if you picked up on it as well. Just with how we set up, even where we initiated the press from. Because if you notice, like, we had a lower block than we normally did, and we weren't as expansive in terms of where we wanted to press them on the pitch. And we kind of like invited them on, which was very much reminiscent of, say, Chelsea under like Conte, in terms of like where the block was set up. And I thought that, I wanted to ask you if you thought that that was mainly down to the tactical switch, or was it the City that basically just pushed us back and we had problems getting defining where we wanted to initiate the press from?
Well, certainly first half, that's true. And you know, I think it's not hyperbole to say you would be insane to play a high press against City in the first half. You know, City don't shock and awe. They're not Liverpool. They don't go heavy metal football from moment one. They play their football, and they play it really well. And they move the ball in tight patterns and soft angles. You know, they know where they're going. They run off each other really well. And you've just got to be switched on. You've got to concentrate exactly where all those players are going, because Guardiola has a system where players know where they're going to run off. And he plays on the front foot, and it's all about possession, and it's all about moving the ball quickly, and it's about finding angles. And you know, that's part of Guardiola's genius. I don't think anybody can deny that the kind of football that he plays is complex, and it requires really good players to do it. So you have to concentrate. So the low block comes as a consequence of understanding that whilst they're not going to shock and awe you, they will move the ball around. So you'd be kind of crazy not to put a low block in to start with. The skill of Sarri is in the second half is going, okay, we've done that. We've got the advantage. We don't need to low block now, because they're going to come at us. If they come at us, they will leave gaps at the back. And so we'll exploit the gaps at the back. So, you know, you've got a bit of a Russian roulette going on now, Pep. Do you chuck everything at us and leave us exposed at the back and let Hazard come in? Or do you try and play us in midfield? And I think they're utterly bamboozled Guardiola, because nobody does that. Everybody goes, we're just going to sit back. We've got a goal. We're going to sit back and defend now. Somebody attacking Guardiola, he's like, I don't know what to do now. People don't do this to me.
It's funny, because like Liverpool had that same tactic last year as well. When it worked. It was brilliant, you know. I was actually really pleased to see not only the fact that he was able to like show us a tactical switch and see it implemented at such a high level and of effectiveness, but also the composure, like, and the concentration. I know you spoke on that before, the determination and concentration that it takes to play that style. Granted, it's not something that's foreign to our style, our football players, because we've done it before under on Mourinho, and again under Conte. So it's not foreign to them, but just seeing it implemented at that level in such a high stakes game was impressive. And coincidentally, I really thought that like the reason why we were able to win that match was, of course, down to determination, but also our ability to play out of the back, which I have not seen a Chelsea team be able to do with so much composure and so much effectiveness, especially in the second half. There were some moves that they executed in the second half down the right flank in particular that were brilliant. And I've never seen City as exposed as I've seen them that particular moment in the second half. And
again, that right flank's interesting. They took Sane off. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like Sarri was kind of bewildered when he came off. But it was like, of course they're taking you off. You're getting done every time. You can't get past Azpilicueta. You can't track. You're getting done every time. Of course they're going to take you off. You're completely ineffective. Right. You know, and to kind of neutralise a player like Sane out of the game, I think that's great credit to our defence and our midfield to do that. You know, our right-hand side was brilliant. Azpilicueta, I think, had a great shout for man of the match. you probably have to give it to Luis, but I think he had a great shout for his 300th appearance to go on and play. I will say this, big players play in big games and they turn it on in big games. And there's something about a big player, an elite player, that relishes that challenge much more than a away game to Wolves or Stoke or Hull or somewhere like that. That's the game they want to play in, and that's their stage. And actually playing elite football at that level, it sometimes turns something on in players. And this goes back to, you wouldn't put Callum Hudson-Odoi in a game like that.
No.
You wouldn't put, Ampadu in a game like that, because this is a big, elite, global TV audience game, and it's like, you have to be so good to play in it. Just to be on the pitch in a game like that, you have to be so good, to perform at that level, with the nerves.
It's just you have to have a cool head as well, you can't...
Yeah, that's what I mean. You have to be so confident in your ability. The ball comes to you. I mean, if that were me, I don't want the ball. I don't want the ball. Don't give me the ball. I'm terrified. But it's like those players. Give me the ball. Give me the ball. I will do great things with the ball. The Cantes of the world. Jorginho. I think that's when you really see the value of Jorginho. He doesn't panic on the ball. He doesn't get flustered. He gets caught in possession occasionally. But I think that's probably getting used to the pace of the Premier League. But I think that but players like that who just like you want players in games like that to say, give me the ball. And every player on that pitch for Chelsea went, give me the ball.
Yeah.
Nobody hit. And you saw in the Wolves game, Morata was like, please don't give me the ball. I don't really want it, because I think I'm going to miss. And it's like, there was a complete swagger about Chelsea in that second half. And I think that's what got people out the seats. That's what got that atmosphere going, was you suddenly saw our football team swaggering against, frankly, and let's be honest, they're probably the best team in the world at the moment. And we absolutely schooled them. We schooled them in the second half. I've never seen a Pep Guardiola Man City team tactically schooled like that.
I wanted to touch on Azpilicueta just because I mentioned in one of my earlier videos that he was struggling to find the distance between the man and the goal in terms of like spacing, and he was also often getting caught out, played around. And even when he got tight, he wasn't winning the ball very often. And it was I said I was going to give him till December to sort that out. And it seems as though, like, if that game again on Saturday is any indication, he's actually worked that out really well and was imperious, like not only against like Sarri, but he bossed Raheem Sterling. And he basically allowed for that. Like, again, he did get help, but like that whole flank, he patrolled that whole flank like we remember him, even 2-3 years ago when he played left back under Jose Mourinho and stuff like that, and just bossed it then. And it was just great to see. I thought that his game allowed us the freedom to get up the pitch and make those combinations, because he was just so imperious on that flank. What do you think?
I agree. I think that one thing that is benefiting Dave at the moment is that Sarri is not really putting so much emphasis on his attacking play. He's basically saying, we're playing four at the back. You're a right back. You're not a full, you're not a full back moving forward. I want you to defend. I want you to be a really good defender. He doesn't push his fullbacks right up the pitch. I mean, that kind of hurt us a little bit against Spurs, not doing that. But he's kind of saying to Azpilicueta and to Alonso to a degree, just make sure you're defensively sound. In the defensive phase of the game, as he describes it, I need you to be sound.
What do you think about...
But that's a bonus.
Oh, sorry.
But it's not...
Sorry, I interrupted.
It's a bonus. I don't think it's the number one priority. The number one priority is make sure that flank is covered, that we're able to play the ball out of defence through you into midfield. If you can get up, if you can overlap, that's great. But make sure in the defensive phase of the game, you understand what I need you to do. And that hasn't been working. Balls have been coming, into that bottom right and left quadrant, and attacks and goals are coming from those situations. But then starting not to now. I mean, Man City was brilliant. I think it kind of clicked what a defence have to do. And I think it kind of took a world-class team running at them for them to realise, if I listen to the manager, if I listen to what he's trying to tell me, if I play this system, I will be okay, because I have players around me that are good enough. Agreed.
I just wanted to quickly, I know we mentioned, you quickly mentioned the differences between Jorginho and Cesc, and I think it was evident these last two games. Jorginho has just got like a calming effect on the pitch. And it was evident again in the City game, whereas with Cesc in the midweek game with the Wolves, I felt like his calming effect is different. Like when he's in possession and he's not pressured on the ball, he's able to deliver balls like nobody's business, like nobody before him really. But whenever he is, under pressure or sort of like has to rush to make decisions, he often gives it away. And I found that like Jorginho can play at pace. He can play at tempo. And I thought that was the difference between the two in the fulcrum of the team, like the ability to understand where you need to be in order to receive the ball and also play it at pace to break the press. And it's just, I don't really feel like we have a replacement for Jorginho right yet. As much as Cesc is good on the front foot, getting forward and whatnot, I don't think that he's a natural replacement for Jorginho in this particular style.
No, and I think that this goes back to this, hey, play Conte in his original position argument, which I don't buy. You know what I mean? Because we've proven now that, in the Fulham game, he won the ball high up the pitch. He gave it to Pedro, and Pedro scored in the.
You texted me right after as well, so.
Exactly, and in the game against City, there he was arriving late on the box to pressing up on Sane and winning the ball. He's not sitting on the halfway line. He's not the last man of defence anymore. He's pushing up. I like him in that position. I understand why people get frustrated. I don't think he's frustrated. I think he understands what his job is to win the ball higher up the pitch and put us on the front foot. But going back to Jorginho, and it kind of ties in because, Sarri recently said, I prefer having Jorginho at the base of the midfield diamond, call it what you want, because he's a more technical player. And a lot of people interpreted that as Kante's not as good a player as Jorginho. But I understand what Sarri's saying. He's saying that the range of passing that Jorginho's got, the range of technical ability that he's got does exactly what you say, which does allow him to dictate the tempo of the game. Whereas Kante is much more about being an outlet and also about being an option, but also being a destroyer. That's not Jorginho's job. And I think that what Sarri's saying is attacks start from a player with technical ability who can pass the ball and receive the ball at pace and at tempo and move the ball at tempo. That's not what Kante does. And whilst he's an outlet, he doesn't provide that other stuff. So I kind of get what Sarri says. I think occasionally in games you can drop Kante back. I think Kante did play a little bit deeper against City, but it's it's interesting to note that I think we're starting to see what Sarri is trying to do with Kante.
Absolutely. And what was your take on seeing Hazard in the false nine role? I mean, he really wasn't involved as much as he would like to be, I'm sure. Wasn't really getting on the ball very often.
He said that. He said that in his post-match. Yeah. He said, you don't touch the ball enough, and he said it in a way that was slightly disappointed. He's a player that loves the feel of leather on his boot. But he was like, I understand what I had to do. I had to hold the ball up. I had to be able to turn and bring other players into the game. I understand what my job was. You can tell he doesn't want to do that every game. He wants to be out there on the wing, jinking past people and dictating the play and creating things. But I think that he's a good soldier, and he was told what to do and asked what to do. And let's be honest, Sarri's always had fairly small forwards. He likes nimble small forwards. Before this idea that he wants a big target man, he probably doesn't. If he does buy a player like Icardi, that's going to fit much more into his philosophy than if he buys a player like than Harry Kane or something. He likes that fluid front three up front, bringing other people into the game. So, I think that Hazard playing in that role was effective. I think when I saw the team sheet, I slightly had a bit of trepidation because it's not worked in the past when other managers have done it. The false nine thing hasn't never really worked for us in the past. But if you look at the form of Morata and Giroud and what was required in that game, it was absolutely the right thing to do tactically.
Absolutely. And what was your? What do you think that this actually holds for like Giroud and like Morata? Because it was so effective against what we both consider to be the best team in Europe right now. And horses for courses, obviously, but it looked brilliant. Like, let's be honest. Hazard maybe in a lesser game would have more opportunities to get on the ball and also have more opportunities to get opportunities at the goal. But what he provides, or what the three of them provide in terms of the fluidness of an attack, it's going to be hard to see. We got Brighton in midweek. It's going to be hard to see a change in that.
Well, we got Moldivi midweek, which is the
the pub
team in the Europa League, and then we've got Brighton on
the weekend. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't think he'll play against either of those teams because, for the simple fact that both of those teams will need to break them down. We'll need to break them down. We're not looking to, to counter against those teams. They will be sitting back against us, and we will be trying to break them down. So therefore, you probably do need a target man in those games. You need someone big to hold it up. Giroud would be playing Hazard in. Hazard will be much more effective on the wing, creating things alongside Pedro and Willian and maybe a striker in those games than perhaps in a game against City where really the game is won or lost in midfield. And I think that, let's be honest, I can't see Mulvidi. If they try and attack us, they'll get picked off because essentially they're a pub team. Brighton are better. They're a Premier League team. But again, they're not going to attack us ridiculously. We need players that are going to break them down. Playing a false nine in a game like that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, maybe not.
Just as it works against a team like City, I don't think it'll work against a team like Brighton because, when you're trying to break teams down, when it's like when they will have a low block, you want a big player holding the ball up, shielding the ball, putting some balls in the box. You don't want that kind of airy-fairy stuff around. That's counter. That's my take. I may be wrong.
I wanted to, in our last video together, we were touching on just the philosophy of football, and I wanted to touch on this just a little bit more closer to where I was going with it, in that we're struggling to find, I think what I started by saying was that we had 3 different managers in the last 4 years and all have very different philosophies. And what we're noticing is that we don't have a complete team yet under one unified philosophy because, we had Mourinho's style, which was a little bit more pragmatic, and had a certain amount of certain players that he wanted, like big, robust, strong players. And then we went to Conte, who had a similar style, but definitely needed players for a certain with a certain shape, like with his 3 at the back and whatnot. And now we've gone to Sarri, who's a complete opposite of both those guys. And, he wants guys that can play the ball, are good on the ball and can tap it through. And what I was getting at is we're still lacking a philosophy at the board level of director of football that can sort of stitch all this stuff together and not have these mismatched teams all the time. Because I think Sarri's mainly struggled with the implementation of his system because we have such a mixed bag of players right now. Guys that may not have played, he probably, let's be honest, as much as the Conte experiment is proving to be effective in the final third and whatnot, I'm not quite sure that he would have, if he had it his way, that Conte would be one of his choices. And I'd also say the same thing for Alonso. I'd also say the same thing for Morata as a striker. And he's basically making do with what he has. And I'm wondering if at any point we'll get to a point where we have a director of football that has this philosophy in mind, and then managers aren't managers anymore; they're coaches. So the coach comes in and says, "Okay, this is what we're trying to do. This is how we're going to do it."
Well, that's very much the European or continental European way, where a manager comes in and works with the players that he's bought. If you go to a Real Madrid or you go to Barcelona or you go to Juventus, you'll be working with a technical director and a director of football, and he or she or they will be buying players, and the manager will then, have some input, but they won't have the input, and they'll then use those players to do it. And I think, certain managers like Mourinho got very frustrated with that when he managed in Spain and Italy. In the UK, in the Premier League, managers have always been the primary alpha apex predator. They've always been the alpha beast. The manager will oversee everything from the academy to the first team and have final say on all football matters. That's always been sacrosanct. Maybe that's an anomaly in the English game. But I think that's changing with the amount of foreign managers that are coming into the UK. They're used to working with technical directors. I don't think a technical director of football is a magic bullet. I don't think that necessarily solves all the problem. I think you need a manager with a vision. You need a manager who knows what kind of players they want to play. But you also need a pragmatic manager who realises that, you're never going to have 24 players that are all bought, selected and cherry-picked by you. You're always going to have club legends and youth and people coming through and people, seeing out contracts. You're always going to have that level of, of hangover from the previous manager that you have to work with. And you're going to buy players that don't work. And, I don't think that necessarily bringing in a director of football is going to solve any real problems. If they can work collaboratively with the manager and identify, target, and most importantly, get the players, because we know what players we want. Whether they'll come or not, that's another thing. I think people forget that players have free will. Agents, have free will. They don't have to come to Chelsea. It's not obligatory. Even if we put the money on the table that they want to come and live in London, they may have other circumstances that say, I quite like the weather in Spain. My wife is quite happily with her family in Italy. I don't necessarily want to come and live in Cobham. There are all these factors. It's a complex, personal, financial transaction. And I think people think, well, you just say you want a Cardi and you put 100 million euros on the table and he comes. It doesn't work like that.
No.
It doesn't work like that. But people genuinely think it's that easy. People saying activate his buyout clause. Well, what if he doesn't want to come?
Yeah.
What if he set his sights on Real Madrid? What if he set his sights on Bayern Munich? Doesn't have to come to Chelsea. We're not the only option available to elite players. There's a lot into what you're saying. You do need somebody working behind the scenes, having those conversations, building those relationships with agents, making sure that we are an option if a player does become available, and we can go in there and bid and be part of the process. But it's never a done deal to say that just because a player's available they should come. Stupid to think like that.
And I kind of just want to finish up with something that's kind of broken in the news the last maybe 36 hours or so, and that's the Raheem Sterling situation. I don't often deal with things like this because I just feel as I really just like to focus on tactics and whatnot. But like this has become such an a real talking point and something that I think needs to be addressed. What's your take on it, really?
Well, first of all, I'll say, if it's proven that the guy used the language that, that it's been reported that he used, I think it's disgraceful. And I think any right-minded Chelsea fan would fully support prosecution and a lifetime ban. That kind of behaviour and that kind of language has no place in football. It has no place in society. I've been very vocal on social media over the last 24 hours about exactly how I feel about it. I think, a lot of us that have been following Chelsea for a very long time, over 40 years in my case, have devoted our lives to fighting racism in football and anti-Semitism in football. We remember bananas being thrown at Paul Cannonville, our first black player. We remember the reception that certain black players, Jewish players got, and we fought very, very hard with organisations like Kick It Out and, anti-racism organisations to stop that behaviour at football. And, it's so depressing to see it sneaking back. And I think, in some ways, a reflection of the society that we live in and the politics that we're, that our politicians are espousing at the moment. The issues that we have in England, we're a very divided society at the moment. Issues like Brexit and various other things. And I think that type of behaviour is sneaking back. That certain public figures are almost giving people permission to act like that. And it's really, really important that we, as individuals, as individual football fans, make as much of an effort as possible to show our displeasure and our disgust of it, and peer pressure stamps it out, but also that Chelsea Football come out and make a really hard and fast stand against this. There is some dispute over what he said. Hopefully, Raheem Sterling, I think, has come out and said, he said this, I'm with Raheem on this. If he heard it, I'll back him 100% on it.
100%.
Yeah. But I think due process has to be followed, and that the investigation has to be carried out. We have to allow the innocent till proven guilty, tenet of our law to play out. But ultimately, if that language was found to be used, if that person was found to behave like that, there is absolutely no excuse for it, and there should be no tolerance for it. And every like-minded Chelsea fan will support me on that.
I'm just wondering if that's enough, though, because I think that one of the problems that I have with like the overall tone of this whole thing is that it's now being directed at the Chelsea fan base first, and I'm not quite sure if that's where the ire should be directed. First of all, this idiot if proven guilty, is an entity unto himself. And I think that the media has played a role in painting certain support groups as such. And like that's where it starts for me with the media. And I think that that's basically where Raheem Sterling took with his statement, where he's talking about how the media have their part to play in this as well, in how they paint these sort of pictures. And also, I struggle. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. Go carry on.
Yeah, no, I struggle with whenever these events come up, that we only look towards kick it out as a means to eradicate this stuff. Like, we should be looking at, like, politicians should be stepping up on this stuff. We have UEFA. UEFA doesn't do much about that. Doesn't have really much input there, and that also the FA. It's always it seems like it's always being directed towards kick it out as the only real outlet to try and say something against it. And I think it's gotten to the point right now where we need to see more action on so many different levels of politicians and and also just like these different what would you call them, sanctions, I guess.
Yeah, look, I agree with all of that. I think UEFA and FIFA particularly have been very, very poor in their sanctioning of clubs and individuals that have shown racist behaviour in the Champions League and at international level. Absolutely, I think they've proven to be completely inadequate to the task in front of them. I think Chelsea Football Club's put a lot of initiatives in place, as much as they can. Listen, the thing is, you don't become a racist standing on a football terrace. You come into the football ground a racist. And football doesn't build racism. It reveals racism. And so the problem is a societal problem. Racism is a societal problem, and we have to look inwardly at ourselves as football fans, but also as ourselves as people. And I think the way that this is solved is through peer pressure, is through other fans turning around and saying this is unacceptable, and that's how it kind of played out from the 70s onward. And that's why I'm so depressed that it's come back, because I think we were in a very good place where it was taboo. You didn't do that stuff, you didn't say that stuff, you didn't do it. And certainly it's been raging in the UK today, the debate about the media's involvement in it, and not so much targeting football clubs, but the way they've targeted young black players and the way that they have described young black players. On the one hand, you've got, a story saying, a young white player buys a £2 million house for his mother, and that's presented in a very positive light. And then Raheem Sterling splashes £2 million, on pad, and it's done in this kind of lurid, sensationalist, racist way, and there's many, many examples of the way the media portray Raheem Sterling and against the way they would treat a young white player of his similar standing. And I think that the media does have a lot to play in the way they inform people's view of players, and it could be stronger, in terms of the way it deals with it. In terms of politicians, yeah, of course, but they're all useless. It's up to us. It's up to us, Dennis. We have to do it. We have to call it out when we see it. We have to condemn it when we see it. It's difficult. It's frightening to confront someone on a football terrace, someone who's drunk and racist and, with a group of people. It takes bravery and courage to confront a violent thug, who's being racially abusive on the terrace. And that's why Kick It Out is good, because Kick It Out has an app. And on that app, you can input somebody's seat number, you can put a photo, you can put some details, and you can send it anonymously. And then the CCTV will pick that person up. So, I wouldn't say to anybody, go up and get in the face of a 6'7" racist skinhead thug, much as, I've done that with understandably terrifying consequences before. But I wouldn't advocate everybody does that. There are ways and means of doing it. And the more pressure we can put on not only our club, but all clubs, to make sure that stewards address this stuff, that the police are in place to stress this stuff, that they actually do something about it rather than play lip service to it, the better, the experience for everybody will be.
Andy, you are a gem, man. I really appreciate you doing this, and hopefully we can do this again. I would love to have you on again and just get through some of these other talking points that may arise and whatnot. But you're just so knowledgeable, well-spoken, and obviously it's a credit to have you as a part of this. But let's do it again if you'd
it again. Yeah, always a pleasure, mate. Love to see you. See you soon.
All right, take care.
Bye.